Welcome to this very first session of the NAMMA Conference 2021. As we begin, I'd like to say a deep thanks to all of our partners and sponsors for this particular event, but for all of NAMMA's programs throughout the year. A big thanks to the TK Foundation, to the Mission to Seafarers, the ITF Seafarers Trust, the Seafarers International Union, the West Gulf Maritime Association, the International Christian Maritime Association, the Diocese of Victoria and Texas, who is represented by Bishop Brendan Cahill, who is the Bishop Promoter of Stella Maris in the United States. Thankful for our partnership with NAMMA. NAMMA was one of the founding partners of NAMMA, and we continue to work with them regularly. The Port Welfare Partnership Project of ICE1 will have a presentation from the Port Welfare Partnership Project tomorrow. And then finally, the Merchant Navy Welfare Board, with whom we collaborate on the ship visitor course, which many of you have taken in the past number of years. Well, folks, let's begin this first session, Learning Through Uncertainty. Our first speaker is Deacon Paul Rosenblum, who is the current president of NAMMA. He is also a chaplain for Stella Maris in Charleston and is the regional director for Stella Maris in North America. Deacon Paul, please lead us in this first session. Deacon Paul, are you there? I can't hear you. Well, there we go.
Here I am. Good morning, good afternoon, as the case may be. I'm not exactly sure how widely around the world we are distributed right now. But it is a great pleasure to see you all today and welcome you to our annual conference. Like all of us, I'm sure we would certainly rather be speaking to each other in person, gathered in some room, somewhere, anywhere, really, where we could meet, share our smiles and our handshakes and even some hugs along the way. But the virtual world is still the reality for gatherings of all sorts, and our conference is no exception to that. And I certainly hope, I'll offer some prayers as well, that this is the last time we're going to have to need to gather this way. Nevertheless, we are here to enjoy this opportunity to talk and share and learn from our speakers and from each other. And for that, I am grateful. So thank you all for being here with us today. I'd like to thank the program committee for their work, first of all, in getting this conference organized and off the ground on fairly short notice. When Jason and I had the first meeting with them, we had to determine the logistics for the conference and, of course, its theme. And almost immediately, the word COVID came up. I can't really remember who said it first, but it was likely in all of our minds. And that makes sense. Everything that we do in our ministry and indeed in all aspects of our lives has that word hanging over it. It is inescapable. And sad to say, it looks like it will continue to be a shadow over us into the foreseeable future. As we talked about how to approach that subject, we all agreed that we wanted to be sure that this was just not a time for all of us to sit around and lament about all of the troubles that the seafarers have faced and will continue to face, and wail and gnash our teeth about all of the difficulties we experience in our efforts to minister to them. And you know, that really is fertile ground for lamenting and gnashing of teeth. The pandemic and the disturbances it has brought to the maritime industry and our work in it offers great opportunities for doing just that. We could spend all of our time together these 2 days doing just that, grumbling about how we can no longer have the meaningful fellowship that comes from sharing meals with crew or chatting with them in the van on the way to the mall, fretting about how we cannot pray with so many of them as frequently as we would like to, moaning because the lack of shore leave has adversely affected their well-being, bewailing the policies that shipping companies and government authorities impose that make it difficult to provide the care we would like to give to the seafarers, and regretting and ruing, I'm running out of synonyms for that word, the many other disruptions to our lives and in their lives that we have to deal with. But we have to be careful not to fall into that trap. It accomplishes nothing. It does no good to the seafarers or to us to focus on these disruptions that are really out of our control. And that's not to say that we should not be concerned with them. We need to raise our voices to advocate for the welfare of the seafarers. But I find that it can be really self-defeating to focus too much on these issues, because I, for one, and perhaps you as well, can become distracted by them and fail to do all that we can do for the benefit of the seafarers. I do find myself doing that far too often and have to remind myself that I need to focus on what is under my control, the day-to-day acts that we all do to help the seafarers and make their lives and ours better, one small act of kindness at a time. And there is much good to talk about there. Gangway visits with goodie bags and gifts, not just at Christmas, but every day. Shopping trips to Walmart and other stores to buy the supplies the seafarers need when they cannot go get them themselves. Online shopping to help them get needed items. A moment of prayer with the one or two crew members on the gangway duty that we meet, asking them to pass the prayer on to their shipmates. And now, of course, for the last 2 months or so, the very essential provision of vaccinations that not only provide physical protection against the virus, but provide emotional relief, even joy to the seafarers too. All of these and so much more. The mechanics of our ministry, how we go about doing things may have changed, but the essence of it remains the same, and that's what we need to focus on. And so the theme for the conference, leading and learning through uncertainty, a positive approach to the current pandemic disruptions, looking back on what we have experienced, not just to rehash it, certainly not to lament, but using our experiences to explore and share what we have learned about our ministry that might help us as the pandemic continues and into that longed for post-pandemic world, using the lessons learned to lead us into the future. That is our goal these next 2 days. I'm looking forward to hearing from our speakers and panelists and from all of you and sharing in this at least virtual fellowship that we have for these next few days. May Christ's peace be with you all this day and always. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much, Deacon Paul, for those words. I think it really helps frame our overall conference theme and gives great food for thought that we can discuss in small groups a little bit later today. Our next speaker is Mr. Guy Platten, who serves as the Secretary General of the International Chamber of Shipping. It's wonderful to have him here with us. Today, he's going to talk a bit about what the International Chamber of Shipping does, and especially how the shipping industry has responded in these times of uncertainty. Please take it away, Guy.
Thank you very much indeed, Jason, and good day to all of you, and really honored to be able to join you on your today's NAMMA conference.
Sorry, we cannot see you. I think you're there. There you are.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
As soon as you.
Thank you.
Yeah. There, go ahead. Yeah.
Thanks very much. Sorry, yeah, I'm really honoured to be and address your conference today. Perhaps just to start with a little bit about the ICS. We are an association of associations. We represent national shipowning associations from across the globe, and together collectively we represent about 80% of the world's fleet, and we represent the industry at international fora like the IMO, the International Labour Organization, World Health Organization, and other United Nations bodies, as well as lobbying for an industry as a whole. Really pleased to be talking to you on the theme of this conference, learning through uncertainty. I think looking forward, we've got to learn to live with uncertainty going beyond the pandemic. There's so much going on. I'd like to cover some of that as well during my talk with you all. Of course, protecting and supporting seafarers must always be a priority, but the events of the past 18 months have shown that into sharp relief. Shipping has continued to keep global trade flowing throughout the pandemic, and this has only been possible due to the hard work and sacrifices that seafarers have made. This has been in the face of significant travel and other restrictions that have been imposed on our seafarers by governments and other agencies around the world. Perhaps an early lesson, though, that we've learnt from all of this is that we've had an unprecedented coming together of ship owners' representations, the social partners, the ITF, with the welfare charities. I don't know how many calls I've been on with you, Jason, during the last 18 months, but it's been many. And I think what we have learned is that collective strength has been incredibly powerful as we've developed detailed protocols to keep our seafarers safe. We've produced medical guidance, we've vaccine roadmaps and numerous other publications and support and assistance. And collectively, we've also lobbied very hard. And I do believe we have made some progress. I've worked in the maritime industry for nearly 40 years now. And I would say that the crew change crisis has been truly unprecedented, both in scale and the impact it has had, and it's still having on seafarers around the globe. I'm an ex-seafarer, and I can relate to the periods of separation, the loneliness that can happen, the missing out of key family events, be it births of children, weddings of close relatives, and the passings of loved ones as well. And I've also been experienced when, you know, you've been delayed from getting home for one reason or the other, and that feeling the pit of your stomach as you yet another few weeks on board. But really, the months and months of extra that our seafarers have had to do has you know, shown us to the world how much we rely on them, how much we care for them. And they are resilient, seafarers are resilient, but they've endured too many hardships over the last 18 months. We've heard also certainly too many shocking incidents related to crews. For example, denial of medical assistance. Can you imagine having a really, really bad toothache and not being able to get ashore to see a dentist, and just how debilitating that is? We've had shocking incidents of a crew unable to repatriate the body of a deceased crew member who died from a non-COVID related illness. And over a period of 2 weeks, they were turned away from 4 ports in 4 different countries that would not accept them or allow them to deliver the crewmate's body home. Imagine the mental toll this has had on the crew. And unfortunately, this has not been an isolated incident, but one story out of hundreds, if not thousands, that demonstrate the suffering seafarers have endured during the pandemic. At the peak of the crew change crisis in 2020, some 400,000 seafarers were impacted well beyond the length of their contract. Thanks to the hard work of our collective voices together, and the lobbying that we've done, we've managed to reduce those numbers to about 200,000. And those initiatives, including things, as we're going to hear from Kasper, like the NEPTUNE declaration and other industry initiatives, have really helped to deliver on this. But sadly, we see they are rising again now as governments reimpose travel bans due to the new variants. This is despite tried and tested COVID-safe protocols that the maritime industry has developed, which has been endorsed by the United Nations through the International Maritime Organization. The situation cannot continue, but we must redouble our efforts to remind the world, remind governments, remind society as a whole that seafarers are key workers, not only in name, but they must be prioritized for vaccinations and allowed to travel home to ensure that this crew change crisis becomes a thing of the past. Messaging from governments must be clear and direct, and actions must follow words. They cannot be mere platitudes, particularly in times of crisis. We have regulations such as the Maritime Labour Convention to protect the rights of seafarers. It is currently ratified by 98 international labour organisation states. The pandemic has tested this regulation with repatriation, entitlement to leave, minimum manning, medical care on board ship and ashore, and access to shore-based welfare facilities, all having been impacted. Following a joint complaint with the International Transport Workers Federation, we had a landmark ruling from the ILO in 2020, which found that governments collectively had breached seafarers' rights and had failed to comply with the provisions of the Maritime Labour Convention. As someone said, the Maritime Labour Convention is there for times of crisis, and it seems that the first crisis, it was disregarded by governments. Medical care ashore, surely the minimum manning obligations must be respected, including during a pandemic, especially during a pandemic. As we move forward, more countries should ratify the MLC. There's also work to be done to strengthen the regulation that we do have and in better implementation. The situation differs considerably between countries. Some have gaps, while others still not have adopted the basic legislation that will give effect to most MLC provisions. They can and should do better. Once again, governments that show leadership in declaring that they have ratified this important legislation must back that up with action. Governments just must show initiative and provide direction. We are seeing this in some nations, and I just want to make it what's happened in the United States and through your work and NAMMA's work in vaccinating seafarers has been truly remarkable. Tens and tens of thousands of seafarers have been vaccinated, and we're slowly seeing it in other countries as well, such as Canada, of course, Netherlands, Cyprus, United Kingdom, Belgium, Germany, but there's still many, many more countries which still have to start vaccinating seafarers, and we need leadership and we need certainty now more than ever. This last 18 months has taken a toll of seafarers' physical and mental well-being, and undoubtedly their families too. It has also affected the livelihood of so many. We will be feeling the ripple effects of this crisis for years to come. This is why mental health services for crew are vital, and shipping companies must continue to invest in and bolster them once the pandemic has ended. I would like to take the opportunity to talk about the good work that has been done by so many maritime key workers, not only to name, so many maritime charities to support the seafarer well-being. They've done an amazing job, and I'm really proud of the work that I've seen firsthand that you and your colleagues have done, Jason, over the last 18 months, and you should take all the plaudits they're going, because you really have been that vital lifeline to the seafarers, making sure that they knew that they were wanted and they were cared for beyond the industry itself. And to do that, we've had to have unparalleled collaboration, and it's been essential for the shipping industry to weather this storm and must continue as we move forward. Because we are entering a time of transformation. Uncertainty will be with us for many years to come. Shipping is on the road to decarbonisation, and there will be great automation and digital evolution within our industry. This poses both challenges and opportunities that we cannot face without seafarers. They will always be the heart of any change in our industry. This is a fundamental transformation of our sector, something that we at the ICS are calling the fourth propulsion revolution. Consider that if the global fleet all adopted green ammonia as a fuel, ammonia production would have to more than treble current production, requiring 750 gigawatts of renewable energy. This means that shipping alone would consume 60% of the world's current renewable energy production. The battery challenge is just as great. A typical container vessel would require the power of 10,000 Tesla S85 batteries every single day, meaning it would require 70,000 batteries in order to sail for a week. When you consider the energy needed to power one large container ship across the world in a single day is the same energy needed to power 50,000 homes, you get an idea of the scale of the transformation. This also gives you an insight of the opportunity for seafarers to be part of this revolution. We know that the 1.8 million seafarers worldwide have played a crucial role in maintaining society and global supply, delivering around 90% of goods, including essential medical supplies, food, and energy. This role will only become more important as the world begins to build back from the pandemic. Adapting to change will require a flexible, creative, and dedicated workforce. At present, there is a concern that the impact of the pandemic and the crew change crisis will see young people turn away from careers in shipping. To prevent this, we should get better about talking about our industry and the direction we are headed to ensure that younger generations still see seafaring as an exciting, rewarding, and vibrant industry that I found when I went to join my first ship at the age of 18. We should consider that working patterns may need to change. Leaving friends and families to work at sea for lengthy contracts may no longer be viewed as a necessary sacrifices for a career in shipping. However, contract lengths and the very role seafarers play could change dramatically over the coming decades. Remote shipping and great automation could see a rise in shore-based seafaring roles, meaning more time can be spent with loved ones. I hope this attracts a whole breadth of new talent, new mindsets, and new segments of society into shipping that would not normally view it as a viable career option. Ultimately, digitalization and automation rely on people at its core, and there will be varying degrees of people on board ships for many, many years to come. To ensure shipping is ready for the greener and more digital future, we will need new and diverse thinking in our industry. We will require creative problem-solving skills, such as coding and a willingness to and appetite to adapt and work collaboratively. There will be no one cookie cutter definition of a seafarer going forward. To ensure we are fostering the right talents of the future means not only appealing to younger generations or those already with digital skill sets, but also to upskill our existing workforce. ICS is championing a comprehensive revision of the International Convention of Standards of Training, Certification and Watchkeeping for Seafarers to ensure that basic standards of training are fit for the needs of the 21st century. This would mean our industry could more readily adapt to technological developments, including increased automation. These changes are already happening on board, and we must adapt our training now to make sure it is fit for purpose in the future. We cannot ignore the impact that the pandemic has had on training, particularly for ratings and future officers. There are concerns that we will see a dearth of qualified officers over the next decade, and indeed our recently published BIMCO and ICS Seafarer report, Manning report, shows a shortfall of over 70,000 in the next 5 years. Investment in training will only pay back in dividends. There may be some who would look to cut training budgets as we move out of the pandemic. This will do our industry no good. We must maintain a focus and investment on training so we will remain resilient to the changes on the horizon. As shipping looks to transition to new zero emission fuels, our industry faces many uncertainties in the coming decade. To know what skills and people, technologies and fuels to invest in, we need to see political will and certainty. All too often, governments say the right thing about decarbonisation, but are not backing it up with tangible action. After a tumultuous 18 months, shipping nonetheless stands ready and willing to change. To do so, we must ensure our workforce is supported, are given the resources they need to recover from the impact of the crew change crisis, and that governments maintain their key worker status that seafarers have time and time again proven they deserve. The positive lesson we have learned from last year is we must maintain our partnerships. As you do on board a ship, so must we on land. Ship owners, unions, and maritime charities are working more closely than ever before. And whilst we might not always see eye to eye on every topic, we've seen that working in partnership can produce much more benefits than working against each other. Where governments have been willing to work with industry, we've seen that much more can get done. Just look at the amazing speed in which vaccines have developed. We need that same moonshot approach for shipping if we are to meet the challenges of the forced propulsion revolution. Ladies and gentlemen, we have all an opportunity to approach the next decade with ambition and enthusiasm. The maritime sector is a growth sector and one that will need talented individuals. We as an industry must nurture this for the benefit of the sector and our planet, be that environmental change or of delivering prosperity to all. This is an exciting time for our industry, and I hope you all play a part in meeting the challenge and keep on doing the great work you've done looking after the welfare of our most vital component, our seafarers. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Guy, for those remarks. There's quite a bit to unpack in those remarks, but it's amazing to have that overview of all the key challenges through the pandemic and going forward. I'd like it if you could stick around. I'd like to do question period after our next presenter. So I'd like to have the last presenter, and then we'll circle back for question period. And that gives me a chance to underline if anyone has any questions for Guy or for our next presenter or for Deacon Paul in his introductory remarks. You can put them in the chat already, or after the next presenter, you can go under, in Zoom here, it's under reactions, and then raise your hand. And you can raise your hand and we'll try to fit you in before the end. We might not be able to get to all questions, but if you put them in the chat, at least we can have those questions there. And if we don't have totally a chance, I'm sure I could follow up with Guy or our next presenter to get an answer if you could. So I'll go now again to share my screen, and hopefully I won't share it share it in the wrong way this time. So this is the screen. Is that sharing properly, Kevin?
Yes, it is.
Perfect. So I'd like to now invite our third speaker, Kasper Søgaard, from to present us a presentation on the NEPTUNE Declaration. Kasper is Managing Director and Head of Institutional Strategy and Development at the Global Maritime Foundation. I want to also say that he is accompanied by Bianca Garvin, who is on the call as well. And I just wanted to recognize her. Bianca is an amazing responder to all emails. So if you send her an email, she responds right back. If any of you have wanted to sign the Neptune Declaration, she gets back to you right away. I think a large measure of the Neptune Declaration success is her ability to communicate with all of us. So thank you very much, Bianca, for your work on this Neptune Declaration. Now I'll hand it over to Kasper. Kasper, if you can tell us a bit about the Global Maritime Forum and especially the Neptune Declaration. And if you can just say next slide when you want me to go to the next slide.
Great. Thank you so much, Jason. And first of all, I totally echo what you said about Bianca. She's been amazing in driving the Neptune Declaration and really responsive. So those kudos are definitely well deserved. My name is Kasper Søgaard. As you said, I'm a managing director at the Global Maritime Forum. And we're a not-for-profit organization funded and working together with stakeholders from across the maritime value chain. So we don't just have one set of stakeholders, but we really try to work across the global maritime value chain, because we believe many of those issues that Guy talked so eloquently about will require collaboration across the traditional silos and really to solve those solutions. And what we try to do working together with industry leaders is to identify those issues that are important for the industry and have a huge impact on the world. So among the issues we work on is, of course, decarbonization. But I think this past year, the crew change crisis and finding ways of catalyzing and supporting collaboration to address this issue has been on top of our mind. Coming into it and listening to the questions around going through a period of uncertainty and learnings, I think one of the things that I had, and especially talking to NAMMA and you having this day-to-day interaction and really seeing the suffering and the challenges faced by seafarers, I had a big sense of humility. I took the train this morning. No one was wearing masks. I had my second jab of Pfizer vaccines. I'm sitting in a nice cozy office in the center of Copenhagen, drinking coffee that was definitely on a ship at some point. And if I didn't know about and didn't have engagements with you and other, I could live my life totally oblivious to the crisis at sea. And I think just before going into, I think that disconnect between our comfortable lives, especially in developed countries such as the US, the UK, Europe, and then the reality faced by the people that make our life possible, that total disconnect, I think, is something that to me stands as something that we need to address. And I was very heartened by both Deacon Paul talking about those kind of actions to really help the quality and not lamenting too much, but also raising our voices to make sure that people understand that this is not just about a moral obligation to treat our fellow human beings in a decent way. This is also fundamental for the way our societies operate. As Guy talked about, shipping makes the world tick. We wouldn't be able to live our nice, cozy lives in Copenhagen and Washington and other places if we didn't have those 1.8 million seafarers actually manning the ships that bring us those goods. And I think that kind of sense of indignation, I think, is something that should drive us to see what can we do to improve the system and how can we raise our voices and get heard. As Guy said, how do we get governments to understand their responsibilities, but also the importance of maritime transport and the seafarers as the crucial things. Let's get back to ideas on how to do that, but I just wanted to start that because it's so easy to overlook, and I know you won't do that because that's your day-to-day mission, but a lot of other people are not aware of what's happening, and that's a shame. I'll talk a little bit about the Neptune Declaration just to kind of bring you up to speed. And then I'll focus a lot on the learnings that we have through this. And also, I think the learnings that we've had working together with stakeholders such as ICS, ITF, and many others to see what we can do to make a difference. And I think one conclusions that we've had, and I think that's probably is, I think we've made an impact, but I don't think we've made a bit the impact that we would like to have seen. So I think there's still more work to be done. Next slide. So the Neptune Declaration came out of a virtual high-level meeting that we held in October last year. We had a group of senior industry leaders, and what they came into this conversation about was this situation is unacceptable. we have the seafarers, and we're all so frustrated that we can't get our seafarers. And we need to figure out what we can do as individuals, as companies, collectively to address this crisis. So they decided we want to set up a task force and identify the root causes of the crew change crisis and concrete actions where we can make a difference. It's very clear that the group didn't want to duplicate efforts. We wanted to be able to help reinforce, and this is why we were so happy that Guy accepted the invitation to join and be part of this, Stephen Cotton from ITF, working together with all those organizations and really showcasing that collaborative spirit that Guy also referred to, that we think we've been crucial. The initial objectives were around raising awareness, making sure that stakeholders outside of the maritime industry were aware of this crisis. We wanted to show the willingness of leading maritime stakeholders to drive this change and work together. And again, I think one of the key things that we discussed was, in a time of crisis, the standard operating procedures do no longer work. We need to go beyond what is business as usual and find those creative solutions and learn from each other and share those best practices. So really wanted to do that. And we wanted to build momentum around the concrete actions that were identified. And I think it's fair to say that Guy, ICS worked together with ITF have really made a big push, especially towards government, to get them to, and next slide, to really work together to recognize seafarers as key workers, to really make the call for having priority access to COVID vaccines, to really use those best practice protocols that have been developed by the ICS and others, adopted by the NAMMA, and get government to understand that this is what needs to happen. One of the things that we at the Global Maritime Forum has played a particular role in is see what we can do in terms of increasing the collaboration between ship operators and charters to facilitate crew changes. And I think this is one of the things where we've seen too many examples of companies not being willing to go that extra mile. And I think that's an ongoing source of frustration. What we try to do is to convene some of those that are trying to do the right things and develop best practice protocols and really focus on, if you work together, if you have that close dialogue, you can make a difference. And they can do that with reduced impacts on your operating on your operations. But really it's not an easy task, and sometimes there are a long chain of charterers and receivers that you need to get into, so not easy. Also working with our friends at the World Economic Forum to raise issues about their air connectivity. I think what we were really heartened to see was the number of signatories. So we had more than 300 signatories at launch, and at the moment we're at more than 800. I think this demonstrates the willingness from the global maritime industry to work together and really raise awareness around this. Also managed to go through the media barrier, and Guy has been really critical and ICS in pushing some of these stories in the global media. And I think especially earlier this year, I think we did get quite a lot of traction also in mainstream media. It's my sense that now we've lost a little bit the momentum, and people have gone back to and I think also it's related to when we see our day-to-day lives going back to normal, then probably you don't think as much about the COVID impacts on seafarers and in other places. So I think they're big challenge to keep the focus on this. And one of the things that we tried to do to keep attention on this was to generate data. So we launched the NEPTUNE Crew Change Indicator, which is based on data from 10 of the largest ship managers. I think it's fair to say we invited 10 ship managers to join, and will you share this internal data around the number of seafarers, how many people have been beyond the expiry of the contract. Now they're also starting to share information with us around the number of seafarers being vaccinated. These numbers will come out later this week. And I think it just shows that collaborative spirit. Everyone said, we will share this information. We don't worry about the competition, where we can see this, and we can see this need for bringing in this data to be able to engage with governments and others to say the situation is not getting better. And I think that's been the big story over the past 3 months. It's not getting better. It's with us, and we really need to do something. We have ongoing calls with the task force and really discuss what can we do more. And so if you have great ideas, we're very, very happy to do this. But again, I think the engagement with industry leaders, I think this is one of the issues where we can really feel a sense of indignation and a real sense of we as an industry, we as world society have not fulfill our responsibility towards the seafarers. And I think going forward, one of the key questions to me is, how can we make sure that seafarers won't be left stranded in the way? Both because it's a moral responsibility, but also because our lives depend on it. We couldn't have the life we have unless we have the seafarers. So it's actually also in our self-interest to make sure that we can attract the right people to serve and we haven't been able to do that. What I wanted to share just, and Jason, please, the next slide, of just some personal reflections. I think one of the things that we see time and time again is we have a global maritime industry that basically makes our nations tick. But as soon as there are crises, governments focus on the national interest, and the first response is to close the borders for anything that is. And I think that's really short-sighted of governments, because long-term, we need to collaborate, we need to work together, we need to find international solutions. We've seen this with the COVID crisis. We've also seen this with some of the refugee crises, where we see merchant ships picking up, for instance, in the Mediterranean, picking up refugees, and then basically governments refusing to take these off the ships. And terrible example, and I'm sure Guy can get where like 100 people being stuck on a tanker, really, really unsafe situation for everyone. Government saying it's not our problem. And I think one of the things that we really need to push home is actually having functioning global supply chains. It's in all interest. And this thing about, if I just ignore the problem, someone else will solve it. I don't think that works. We really need to raise that voice. I also think it's really clear that crises require collaboration. And I just want to echo Guy. I think the maritime industry has stepped up, but we need to be better at collaborating and getting the voice of governments. And I think some of the things we've seen is quite often the transport ministries, the ones responsible for shipping, they get it, but then they're overruled by other ministries. So how do we get other parts of governments who really understand the importance of shipping? And how do we get citizens to understand the importance of shipping? Again, coming back to the people, and we had a lot of these conversations. When we talk about seafarers, we need to attract them, but we also need for them to be able to operate effectively. And sometimes we had this mental thought, what if we had a big oil spill? And there we saw, well, it was shipping, it was seafarers being overdue, overworked, not paying as much attention as they should. The potential implications for companies having their goods shipped, or for the marine environment, the risks are really, really huge. Can it be so hard to get these seafarers off their ships and really make sure that I think kind of the risk reward picture of some governments and some stakeholders has been totally skewed. And can we kind of help rebalance the risk reward picture and really get them to, we need to have treat the seafarers in the right way. And I think this comes back to what Deacon Paul talked about, raising our voices, raising the profile of the maritime industry. As an industry we should be proud of, as an industry that plays a crucial role in the world for everyone's lives, and that we should always strive to improve, look at what we can do better. And again, I agree with a lot of the points Guy made, but also something that we can, we could have some swagger in our steps. And we really need to raise that awareness to get the recognition that we would do. And sometimes, I'm in Europe, and if we had treated French farmers the way we've been treating seafarers, Europe would have been blocked. No one would have been able to go on the highway anywhere in Europe, and it would have taken 2 weeks, and it would have been resolved. So I think the resilience of seafarers, I think, is a great testament to their human qualities. But I think it's also, I think it's also important to speak up, because the way that we've been treating them is not the way that they should have been treated, and we need to learn from that. How exactly we do it? Very happy to take your suggestions and ideas. I'll stop now, so we also have some time for questions. And once again, thank you for all your efforts you're making for really making a difference in the life of individual seafarers. That is so important.
Well, thank you so much for that presentation. It dovetails very nicely with the presentation of Guy and with Deacon Paul just before. So now we still have a little over 10 minutes to have some time for questions, and that's the point of this NAMMA conference, not just to have speakers, but also to have some discussion and some questions. So if you do have a question, you can ask it one of two ways. One is put it in the chat box and I can ask it for us, and everyone can see all the questions at the same time. Or you can also, under reactions, you can put your hand up and I can recognize you, and you can open your microphone and ask your question live. That would be great to hear your voice. So we do have a question, one from Steve Wan in Vancouver, British Columbia, and the question is for Guy Platten. Guy, do you have any working examples of these next generation cargo ships? So with the 15,000 batteries aboard, do any of these exist yet?
I think that's the challenge. We don't really have any of these next generation. We have battery powered ships on short sea routes. That technology is evolving, but that will only ever do very short crossings, short sea routes. We still haven't got that technology at scale for the transcontinental routes, and that's the real challenge over the next few years. There's some plans there, but we need everyone to work together to realize them. That's not just the industry and putting investment in, but also governments and infrastructure. A whole heap of things need to happen very quickly if we're going to achieve the goal of zero carbon shipping by 2050, which is clearly our goal. So not yet any working examples, but we're working on them. And I understand, I think Maersk actually have a methanol powered ship, a container ship under construction now. So there's one or two things starting to emerge, but a long way to go.
Thank you very much, Guy. Anyone else have a question? If you can either raise your hand. I don't know if I can see everybody. If anybody is raising a hand, I got to make sure I can look through the list. Henrik from Seafarers International House asks the question, in Guy's remarks, what was that about the energy use of 50,000 houses for a ship? How long? Can you repeat that wonderful tidbit?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you take one of the very large, ultra large container ships, and we saw one being stuck in the Suez Canal for a week or so back in March, and how what disrupted that was the global supply chain, just that one ship. So a typical ultra large container ship would require the power of 10,000 Tesla batteries just to last one day. So in a week's voyage, you would require 70,000. So you'd almost have to tow another 2 container ships behind you to give you the power to tow the original container ship. And actually, that each container ship is the same energy needing to power 50,000 homes. So 50,000 homes equals 1 day of a container ship for that day. So that gives you hopefully some perspective how big these ships are and how much power and energy they consume. Yet, even with all that, they are still the most efficient way of transporting goods compared to road and rail and air.
Thank you so much, Guy. In the chat, Kasper has put a link to an interesting report on zero emission shipping. On one level, this is outside of our purview in seafarers' welfare, things about the future of ships themselves, but nonetheless, it has an impact on the seafarers who are going to be on them.
If I may, Jason, actually, I think it really is within your purview, because I think we're going to see smaller crews. We're going to see a different type of crew coming forward, and we all need to sort of get on board with that idea as well, and how we're going to adapt our own services to meet the needs of the future. So I think it's important, because crew go to the heart of it all, and we're going to need crew going forward. Yeah, that was exactly my point, in the sense that it might seem at first blush outside our purview, but in fact, will directly affect our work, knowing these things. 10, 20, 30 years sounds like a long time away, but it's these ships and these crew are going to be trained relatively soon, and so being aware of it will help us be able to make that long range planning. Guy, a question that concerns most of those on the call, almost everybody on the call, if in seafarer centers in the United States and increasingly now in Canada, is involved one way or another in a vaccine program. And NAMMA's role in this is just to collect information, but it's really the folks on the screen that you see before you who are really doing it day to day, actually helping the logistics to deliver those vaccines. We can hear directly from seafarers about what that means. Can you tell us the perspective of the sort of the high level perspective of the Maersks or the MSCs or the big players in the maritime industry? What are the is this something that companies also are preoccupied with? Is this something that at the highest level is as much a preoccupation as the seafarers themselves make this a preoccupation? Absolutely, it is. I mean, the trouble is companies cannot directly access vaccines, because vaccines have to be delivered through governments. So what I think you've done in NAMMA and your colleagues on this call has been absolutely incredible and amazing. And I know, speaking to ship owner after ship owner, how grateful, really grateful they are, because they know the only way out of this is vaccination. So it is top of the list of priorities. And we just want more countries now to step forward, or to allow companies to, purchase the vaccines to get their seafarers safe. And that's, whilst there is a growing number of countries allowing it, tends to be the surplus doses that they're given, and that's not a sustainable position going forward. So it's a real concern, I think, not, is what happens when the United States, for example, hasn't got any more surplus vaccines and there's booster shots required. How are we going to do that? So it's a real preoccupation about vaccination now. And we think we're about 20-25% of our workforce has been vaccinated globally. That still leaves well over 1 million who haven't been vaccinated, and that's a priority for us going forward.
We have a comment from Chaplain David Reed. Seafarer well-being and safety at sea are linked. A compelling reason for ship owners and charterers to recognize the value of well-being. It's more than just a nice to have. Kasper or Guy, or even Deacon Paul, any comments on that statement from David Reed? Kasper?
Absolutely, and I think there is a lot of realization and that this is the case. I think one of the challenges we've had, and some of the conversations we've had also with charters and others, is sometimes you have senior management saying the right things and willing and really committed. But how do we ensure that this actually translates down into the day-to-day operations, the people that have a budget and are being have you held your budget, and those long-term impacts of short-term decisions? I think there's a need to align incentives, and I think one of the positives that I think we've seen coming out of this crisis, and hopefully we'll see more of, is also both consumers or the customers starting to ask questions. So we had the UN Global Compact come out with a due diligence report, basically inciting customers, the big container customers, saying, have you been in dialogue with your shipping operators about how they're dealing with this crisis? Because if the customer starts asking questions, it suddenly becomes something that will be measurable and has a value. So I think that's important. We've also seen this from some of the investors, and there was a letter made. Fidelity was one of the investment companies making this, and we had a conversation with a shipping guy, and he was sending emails to all of his colleagues that were investing in consumer goods companies or in others, and saying, are you aware that all of the goods that your company delivers to the world are being transported on ships? If there is a breakdown in those global supply chains, and I think we've seen that with Suez Channel, this will have huge implications. Are you doing what you can to make sure that the long-term incentives are actually being taken into account? So I think transitioning to a more long-term perspective on what creates value and creates a sustainable business situation. And I think just what we can see from the container industry, those rises in price are huge and have a huge impact. If we can build a long-term where we make sure that we have enough ships, we have enough seafarers, we know how to operate, we have quality operation, I think long-term that will be a good investment. So how do we align those incentives and maybe pay a little bit more to make sure that our seafarers are treated well in the interest of the long-term future of our economy? And shipping is so inexpensive, it will have no impact on the price for the end good. And I think we owe it to our customers, whether that is about environmentally friendly seafarer well-being. Customers can pay for this, but we need to have that level playing field, and we need to align the incentives. So absolutely, we must build an industry that's not about the lowest cost, but about treating our people, treating our environment in the right way.
Thank you so much. I see Deacon Paul has either a question or comment on, or something to add to it. And then after that, if Guy, you have anything to say after. Deacon Paul.
Yes, just a comment. This is my opinion. I think it's a valid one, that the single most important thing we can do for the welfare of the seafarers, to increase their morale, is to allow them shore leave. And that is something that is, at least in my experience here in Charleston, is a very limited occurrence. all of the other programs that we have are all good things, seminars and chat rooms and all of these things that they can do. But getting off the ship for 2 hours to go to Walmart, a spiritual experience as it may be, that's an important thing. And that's the single most important thing we can do. I had hoped that the vaccination programs would spur that, but so far here in Charleston, at least, and it is not. And we need to, and I guess I'm falling into the trap of lamenting something that's really not under my control, but somehow we have to convince the ship owners that their vaccinated seafarers are safe going ashore, at least most of the places in the United States now, that they, with precautions, we have taken care of the vaccines. Please let them get off their ships and do the 2 hours of not looking at containers that they need to have.
Thank you, Deacon Paul. That's a great comment to discuss a little bit later as well. No doubt others have experience of this. Guy, go ahead.
Yeah, just to echo actually what Deacon Paul's just saying, I mean, just as a seafarer, when I was seafaring, just getting ashore for a couple of hours can make all the difference in the world. It really can. So just endorse it. It was just to say on the whole, I think, and just building on what Kasper said as well, there is also now in play through the UN Global Compact, a human rights due diligence checklist now for the entire supply chain, which includes shipping. And that's a really important development over the last few months as well. So that's forcing the big supply companies like Unilever and others, Walmart and others, who follow this to make sure that their entire supply chain, we're looking after welfare, including that of seafarers at that particular part of the supply chain. So that's another development that's happened over the last few months as well, and builds on the Neptune Declaration.
Thank you so much, Guy. We do have a couple more comments, but we are running almost out of time. One from Patty in Montreal about surplus vaccines. We're going to circle back to vaccines a little bit later in the program, so we can discuss that a little bit more. But one last one for Kasper and the Neptune Declaration. How does the Neptune Declaration help cruise ship workers? Has there been any impact and any link between the Neptune Declaration and the cruise sector?
So the Neptune Declaration covers all segments, and we do have cruise liners who have signed up to it. I think you probably know more about the situation on the ground with cruise ships and those challenges that all seafarers are facing. I think it's especially in the beginning of the crisis, we saw these horrible stories. So I think all seafarers are affected, and then the Neptune Declaration, I think the things that are in there, if that was delivered by governments, I think that would also have a huge impact on cruise ships. But of course, the big challenge is, as Guy said, recognizing seafarers as key workers is great, but it's actually, what does that mean in practice? Does that allow seafarers to get off the ships and return to this? Does that allow seafarers to get vaccinated? I think, and just maybe a personal, there's probably a chance that the people working on board cruise ships will be prioritized some places because they're actually serving the people that wouldn't want to go on board a cruise unless the crew is. So I think for that, they might have a comparative advantage, say, a Filipino crew on a boat carrier, and also because they're visible. But I think we need to get all seafarers access to vaccines to really unblock this. And I think we also need to get governments, and I think this is probably what we'll see over the next 6 to 9 months, with Corona, with the Delta variant, Corona becoming an endemic, we will not be able to eliminate it. And we have to find ways of living with this and balancing the risks with also having society that works. And I think it's important that, I've been abroad for my summer holidays, and, like, why can't we get those key workers aboard if we follow the protocols? And I think there needs to be a little bit higher risk tolerance going forward, because we will have the coronavirus with us for a long time, and we need to learn to live with it, and we need to accept that we cannot guarantee that there will be no cases, but we can really reduce that risk and the implications. And I think seafarers are one of those where the risk-reward picture is right, because seafarers are so crucial for our world economy. Then maybe I won't be able to go to Disneyland, but maybe that's a price worth paying to get the seafarers off their ships.
Well, thank you so much, Deacon Paul. Thank you, Guy. Thank you, Kasper, for these wonderful remarks that I think kicked off our conference very well. We have lots to discuss.